Welcome to Personal Development Mastery. This is episode 200. And as you can probably guess, this isn't 𝘁𝗁𝗄𝘆𝘀. My name's Will Polston, and I am delighted that on today's show, I have the pleasure to be joined by a very special guest. Somebody that, if you listen to this podcast regularly, you know very, very well indeed. It's the incredible 𝘁𝗁𝗄𝘆𝘀. Aggie is a zealous podcaster and knowledge broker, and he's on a mission to inspire others to grow, stand out, and take action towards the next level of their lives. So Aggie, welcome to your show.
Will, thank you very much for this amazing introduction, and it's amazing to be celebrating the episode 200 with you. Thank you.
No, it's an absolute honor to be able to share this special, very special anniversary episode with you. And for people that are thinking, why have you got somebody else doing this, Aggie? I think it'd be great to give people a bit of context. But before we do that, let's just talk about how special this episode has been. This podcast has been, because as of tomorrow, at the time of us recording this, the podcast will be 2 years old. Yes. You've launched 2 podcasts. You've had close to 300 episodes. You've had 50,000 downloads, over 100 5-star reviews. You've been listened to in over 100 countries, and you're in the global top 2% of all podcasts around the world. I mean, that's some achievement. Congratulations, my man.
Thank you very much, Will. Thank you. It was a fruit of passion. That's how it began, and I think that's one of the reasons that it sounds very impressive when you hear these numbers, but it's really not about the numbers at all. But it's about putting heart into what you do and loving what you do, and then the numbers come as a reflection of that. That's how I see it. But it's thank you for the kind introduction. And,
if I may, because people might be thinking, why is this guy Will doing this? But I've been involved with your journey, and I've loved being part of your journey and seeing you grow and thrive and develop. So I don't know if it would be useful to give people a little bit of context.
Absolutely. That would be great. I give a quick one, and then add if I miss anything important? Because my personal development journey, when it started in 2017, you were part of that as a coach and teaching all those amazing personal development that you were and the events you were hosting. I have interviewed you on my podcast twice, and you have interviewed me as well. So it's been a very interesting dynamic, and we have been working together and became friends also during the years that we've known each other. And I have the biggest respect for you. I love your podcast, and you have interviewed some amazing people, and you're doing also a wonderful job as a fellow podcaster. And in thinking about this special episode 200 and coinciding with the 2 years of Personal Development Mastery podcast, I believe you are the most appropriate person to be sharing this conversation with you, Will. So that's my short introduction of who is it that shares this episode with me. I don't know if you want to add something else.
Well, I mean, what I would love to share, before we go into some really key things on this show, so we're going to be talking about some of your favourite guests, some of the turning points for you, and a whole array of different things. But what I would love for people that are maybe listening to this for the very first time, or they've only recently stumbled across the show and they've started loving it, your own personal development journey, right? So you've called the podcast Personal Development Mastery. What does personal development mastery mean to you?
That's one of the best questions, really, and it took me a while to answer it or to define it myself. When I first named the podcast, I thought the mastery sounds very cool, very cool, personal development mastery, so I'll name it like that. And then I had a couple of my guests early on sharing the name of the podcast or telling me, wow, personal development mastery, and then I realized that I had set the bar too high, or I had set it high inadvertently for myself by naming the podcast Mastery. So I got very stressed out. How am I going to achieve mastery? And then I realized at some point that mastery is not something that can be achieved in a way like a definitive point in time that you achieve and then you, in this case anyway, the personal development mastery, it is for me an ongoing journey, and perfecting your journey of life in different for different people, but that is for me mastery, is the constant growth and perfection of my personal development, my journey, my life, my behavior, my heart, my soul, all that comprise me to move on and ongoing. So it took me a while to realize it's not a destination, because that had disappointed me initially. But it's a journey.
I think it absolutely is, and I think it's a very valid point. I mean, I personally envisage mastery like a spiral, and I imagine that spiral that goes on and on and on and on and on, and it can actually feel quite often. So if you imagine that mastery is in the middle of the spiral at the end, but then you look at it flat, and it looks like it's in the middle, and then you look at it from the side and it's dragging all the way along and getting thinner. So sometimes it can feel like you're back to the beginning, but you're not back to the beginning. You are closer to mastery. I call it the mastery spiral, and I think it's something that's very important indeed. So what I think's important here, again, talking about personal development mastery, and a lot of people, it's very easy to look at someone and think, right, well, they've done it. They're at the end. They've achieved it. But how did personal development mastery, the podcast, start out for you? What if you were to sort of reverse engineer it and go right back to the beginning? What was the part of that catalyst in that journey in terms of taking action for you?
Thank you for taking me back to that time, Will. This is actually my second podcast. So I had another podcast which I was co-hosting, and personal development mastery was born out of a desire to do more interviews, because I realized that I enjoyed doing interviews and connecting with new people and all these conversations. But my previous podcast was like two co-hosts talking, so it didn't fit like in the theme of interviews. So that was the spark that made me create a second podcast, and also the fact that I wanted something that is completely my own. I suppose because you have a similar journey with another podcast, you can understand what I mean. I wanted to create something that is exactly as I want to, and move it on. Little did I know when I started 2 years ago what would happen with it. And I say often that it started as curiosity, joyous exploration. I like that phrase. I wanted to do interviews, and I said, okay, let me create a podcast and see what happens. But very quickly I realized that it became my passion, because I kept on putting more and more time into it. It really consumed much of my time in a good way.
I happen to know that there was something before that, though, because you started posting quotes on social media, 1 quote a day, if I remember correctly. Yes. And what's interesting is that even now your mission is to inspire others to grow, stand out, and take action towards the next level of their lives, which was, albeit maybe subconsciously, the point of posting the quotes align with the same mission, and then the podcast is the next evolution of that thread that you started to pull by posting the quotes on social media.
Yeah, I suppose you can call it like that. It's much more technically demanding to have a podcast, but those posts, daily posts on social media, which again I got inspired by you to do that back in 2016, I think, 17. It was a very good way first to share and hopefully inspire some other people, because I found those quotes inspiring myself. So I thought some others might feel the same. So I started sharing it, and it was, great when you have someone reach back to you and say, I really needed to hear that. So it kept me going. But that was, let's say, a very early stage of moving on. But the podcast also allowed my deep need, which I didn't know at that time, but it's to express myself and speak what I had inside of me and share my voice. And, it was my vehicle of self-expression, among other things. But since we're talking about that.
Yeah, and I want to bring this up because, again, we're talking about personal development mastery, is that this process for you started because you started. And if you've got a desire, a dream, something you want to strive towards, starting in the smallest way is a great way to compound that. Mm-hmm. So look, let's fast forward a little bit. You've now had dozens and dozens and dozens of guests join you on the show. It would be very difficult for me to say what's your top number one guest that you've had, because I can understand for many reasons. But if you were to say sort of who have been your top five, and maybe a sentence or so why each one has been your top five, or maybe a key insight that you learned from each of those five that meant that they were the best ones for you.
That's a great idea, actually, and present company excluded. I will say the other five. So yes, the first one, and I will share them in a chronological order, was 𝘁ᵗ𝗸𝗲𝘄, who studied with Dr. Bruce Lipton, and she also did shamanic apprenticeship in Peru, and what I enjoyed very much about that conversation is that she offered, many times the words of science or rational thinking and the word of spirituality are very far apart, and many people see them at the opposite sides. That conversation gave very concrete evidence or merging science with spirituality in terms that someone can understand and realize that when we talk about the spirit, it's not something out there. It is something that science and even epigenetics, all these things were blended into that conversation. So that was, I believe, very important. One of my favorites. And second one, for the same reason, was Mark Gober, who I interviewed twice, because he studied and interviewed many of the top researchers in consciousness, and he presented it in a very as simple as the topic can allow, of course, in a simple way, scientific evidence of where does our consciousness, our mind come from, where is it inside the brain? And he proves, not him, others prove it, but he reiterates that it's not. So it's fascinating and really changes the way that one thinks about everything, really. So again, bridging the science and spirituality. So I think these two are great to introduce this topic to many people who are completely rational and logical, and they think that spiritual is something out there for the hippies, but it's not. So these were two of them, Will. I'll carry on quickly and mention the other things since you asked. It's difficult to have few, but I narrowed the list down very much. One was, and actually that was quite recent, it was Dr. John DeMartini, who I went into a student mode. That was why it felt very different and very inspiring for me, because I didn't feel like, I was interviewing him. I felt like I was listening to him teach me his wisdom for 45-50 minutes. So that was for me more than enough. He was talking about gratitude. And since that evening when I interviewed him, I have been keeping a gratitude journal every single day. So it's been over 2 months now. So his impact was creating a habit in me, which I believe it's very important. 2 more I will mention. One was David 𝘁𝗸𝗀𝘆𝘀. The reason why this conversation was very important, it was for me very important, because he answered me in a way that made complete sense in my heart. Something I was concerned about, the podcast growth, the podcast numbers, I was looking at it very much like that. And he gave me the message that really resonated, that it has nothing to do with the numbers, and forget about the numbers. Instead, focus on the alignment of the listener and celebrate the one person that gets transformed by the message that you have out there. Because when you have that vibration of appreciation and celebration of the one that is aligned, that will draw more people that are aligned to your message. And that was... I have printed that quote and I have put it on my wall because it was a very profound message. I have said 4, Will, and I will. There is one more, but it's not a guest. It's one of my favorite episodes of all time. Actually, it was a series of episodes. It was a feature about 𝘁𝗸𝗲𝗄. That was like 5 episodes in total, and 𝘁𝗸𝗲𝗄 I will share quickly for you and the people who haven't heard about it. It's a global community that connects heart-centered people who want to make a change and work together towards a new earth. They use the phrase to grow the roots of a new earth. So I interviewed 5 of the co-founders of that organization, and I collated their answers in an audio feature. And that was for me something that it was one of my favorite moments, really, apart from their mission, which involves, humanity. It's not just about me or you or a small group of people. It has to do with the whole earth and humanity. Apart from that, it also allowed me to be very creative and create a storytelling feature with their voices, with me narrating who they are, how they, got inspired to do what they're doing and what their vision is and so on. And I will take a little breath here, but these were 5... I would say more of the most favorite guests or episodes that I've had.
Wonderful. Well,
yes.
I think it'd be really useful for people that are now intrigued about these is if you can put in the show notes a link to each of these episodes so people can go away and listen to them, or at the very least what number episode it is so people can go and hunt them out nice and easily. That'll be really useful.
Most certainly. That's absolutely... you will find all the numbers and the links in the show notes. Yes. Hi, it's 𝘁𝗸𝗲𝗄𝘆𝘀 here, interrupting you with something you may find useful. One of the most frustrating feelings is when you're trying to focus, but you can't get your brain to concentrate on the important work in front of you. This happens to me all the time, and if it happens to you too, you are not alone. 40% of people say they have to make a big effort to concentrate. But if you're having trouble getting focused, I have a solution for you. I'm so excited to be partnering with Brain FM. Brain FM is a great app, and I use it to block out my mental chatter and zone in on my number one priority of the day. Brain FM uses functional music that is backed by science and research, and it is designed to give us that extra edge when we need our undivided attention. And they also have relaxation, meditation, and deep sleep modules that help you unwind and recharge. So if you want to be able to place your full attention exclusively in the activity you choose, whether that's meaningful work or relaxing or getting high quality sleep, right now as my podcast listener, you get 20% off Brain FM subscription at brain.fm/Aggie. That's an amazing deal for such a useful app. Thousands of people have given 5-star reviews to Brain FM. Find out why. brain.fm/Aggie.
Fantastic. So one of the things that I know firsthand from having run my own podcast for many years, like you have had 2 podcasts and I've done many episodes now, have there been any turning points in your life or career as a result of specific episodes or learnings or anything indeed that has meant that you've had a turning point as a result of the podcasts? I'm curious to learn sort of any really big light bulb moments that have really stood out for you.
Thank you for this question. There have been many turning points, and the first one I always remember because it really changed how I was looking at the podcast was around episode 10, when I went from 1 day a week or 1 episode a week to 2 episodes a week. It was when the lockdown started in the UK. So I very quickly realized, because of the amount of time it needed to produce 2 episodes a week, and how much I loved doing it despite the amount of time, I realized that it was a passion, and very quickly it became a mission, with that thing of wanting to inspire people, to give them something actionable they can take and transform their lives. That was a click that happened inside my mind, that the podcast from passion became mission. So that was around episode 10. And one other turning point that I remember was 6 months down the line, after having done 2 episodes a week. All of them were interviews. Well, I had never shared a solo episode because I wasn't sure yet if my voice is strong enough to hold a full episode on my own. And I did that about 6 months into the podcast, and that really changed quite a lot in my confidence. That was episode 44. So I had to go up to there to speak on my own. And since that time, that was the catalyst on allowing me to do more solo episodes, because I realized that I didn't lose my words. I could hold a conversation on my own, a podcast on my own. So that allowed me to do more and different kinds of solo episodes over, the following months and year. I will tell you 2 or 3 turning points that come to mind as well. One was continuing to what you told me earlier. When I realized that I have done, at that time I had done 160 episodes, and I had completely forgotten what had been told. So I started taking them, going back to the old episodes and doing some consolidation and taking out the actionable items and presenting them in a more concise form. So that was, again, something I do as a solo episode, but I take those learnings and repeat them, and also to myself, because there were so many things that I thought at that time, I'm going to do that for sure, and then I forgot it. So it's an opportunity to reiterate, and repetition, which is the mother of skills. In terms of turning points, actually, Will, there is one more, and maybe I will take a break because there are so many, and maybe we can carry on if you want. But one that I feel it's very important to discuss was when, for the first time, probably in my life, I became political at some point, and that was with my conversation with Mark Gober, who was talking about, he had just released a book talking about how the government threatens our liberty. And it was obvious around the world, not just in the UK, that the governments are taking away liberties and where that could end to. So I never cared about politics in my life, but recently, because of, when you feel like your freedom is taken away, I felt compelled to react. So I expressed my opinions over a feature which was also an interview with him about what is happening and what alternative could there be to this traditional structure of government. So I found that fascinating. And again, yes, I was never into politics, but the podcast allowed me to, at least for those few episodes for the future, to express my concern. And I don't know who that resonated with or not, but that's really relevant. Going back to what I was saying earlier, it's about who has the alignment.
Very
so
good.
I'll take a break here, Will. There are many more turning points to consider.
Good. Well, talking of turning points, they're the turning points in the podcast. But what I would love to also share with the listener is what have been some turning points in your life, right? Because you've got an extremely interesting life, I think, in terms of even from how you've gone from being in Greece to ending up here to the profession that you've been in and the various different things. So what have been the top 3 moments in your life that have been the decisions that you've made that have shaped your destiny to be what it is now?
In my life, generally.
In life in general. Well, yeah, let's share some insight for people that maybe don't know about what's been going on with 𝘁·𝗁𝗲𝘄𝘆𝘀 for the last, how old are you now? 25, right? So for the last 25 years, how has that been? What have those been? What have been those catalyst moments?
I will tell you, and I like very much that you call my surname 𝘁·𝗁𝗲𝗄𝘆𝘀, which you are. It's like the Midas, the king that would. So 3 points. The first one, obviously, the biggest one. No, maybe not the biggest one, but the first one was when I moved to the UK from Greece, where, in a nutshell, because it's a long story, but I left a life which on the outside seemed to be fantastic. I had my dental practice in Greece. I was engaged to be married, friends, family, support. But I was feeling empty, so I took the decision and left all that and moved to the UK following a calling, really. And that's the shortest version I can make of that. But that very much changed me very much. I came to a different country on my own. You have to grow quite a lot. And that was very useful to me. That's one. The second one was... and it was at the Tony Robbins event in 2017. It was on day 3 of the event. I always will remember that day because it allowed me to identify a limiting belief that I had all my life, but I didn't know that it was a limiting belief. I thought it was who I was. It was part of my character, of my personality. And that was being shy, being introverted, being uncomfortable socially, not really speaking out their thoughts. I was like that all my life. I thought that's who I was, and on that day I realized that it was a limiting belief, like a voice telling me that people don't care what you have to say. It's not important who I speak. So when I saw that a few months later, I did public speaking because it was so much shocking. And I know that you've been to that Tony Robbins event, Will, and that process, the Deacon process, is very powerful. It helped me really change the way I was looking at my ability to express myself and connect with other people. And so that's the second one. And the third one, it will have to be the podcast, Will. But I wonder if I don't want to put in one moment in time. The other two you can probably narrow it down to a day or to an hour. But the podcast, as a turning point, it allowed me to express myself, to connect with amazing people from around the world and become friends with some of them, to have speaking opportunities at other people's events or podcasts or whatever else they were doing, and being able to, for me it felt like and I kind of changed the subject now, but I will follow it because it takes me there. So many times when I was holding conversations with people who I admired, it felt amazing, to be able to be in the same room, virtual room, with those people and holding this conversation and asking them. It was, it still is an amazing feeling when you realize that, we are all humans communicating, and it's something that Dr. Demartini talks a lot about, putting people on pedestals because you perceive them to be better or more successful or more knowledgeable, and the podcast has allowed me to remove that pedestal from the people that I speak to, and have a conversation like like humans have a conversation. So that for me was a big lesson, or a big realization that has happened as a result of these 3 plus years of podcasting.
Wonderful. It's lovely to hear, and what I think is really important now is that obviously for you've been able to connect with people that you say that you've looked up to and that you've loved learning from. It's been a big part of your own journey. We've been hearing about how you've been able to develop and grow, and there is something special about being able to have those conversations and do that whilst knowing that there's people listening in over 100 countries around the world to these episodes and being able to implement it in their own way, which is incredible. So a few things on that, which is obviously something now that you actually help other people to be able to do. So you have a business now that enables people to be able to, you assist them in the whole process of sort of identifying what their podcast looks like, creating the podcast, growing it, scaling it. So do you want to just share briefly what it is that the new business is that you do and how you help people, so if people are interested, then they're aware of it?
Absolutely, thank you. And it is exactly helping people who want to make a difference in the world with their voice, with sharing their message, or interviewing other people, helping them create more impact and make a positive difference by creating, growing, and scaling afterwards their own podcast. Podcasting is something that is, you're listening to it, so you know how important it is. And at the same time, it has lots of complexities, learning curves, and some difficulties to implement in order to do it. So I take all those complexities away with my experience and take you from the notion of I would like to have a podcast, but I have no idea what to do, and take you into a finished podcast that is working, that is attracting audience, that is making an impact, that is fulfilling the purpose that you want to have a podcast about, and we can do that in a very short time. I usually say 30 days, but that's probably faster than most people would like to do it. So a couple of months maximum to have a quality podcast, because I believe also that is very important. It's easy to put a recording out there and upload it, but that doesn't make it a podcast that people will listen to and be inspired or influenced. So that's, again, in a nutshell. So Will, thank you for asking me. Every time, when you get a chance to describe it, it goes in a slightly different way. So it was slightly different this time. So thank you.
You're welcome. And for people that are curious, is there a resource or PDF or something they could download that they can just start to get a bit of an insight into what some of the benefits are and what would be involved that we could put in the show notes?
Yes, there is. I have a free guide how to create your podcast in 7 simple steps, and it will give you a good understanding of the essentials that you need to progress, and that will be in the show notes, or you can go to the website 𝘁𝗸𝗲𝘄𝘆𝘀. You will find a big button there that will take you there immediately.
And I highly recommend it. I've had the pleasure of seeing this particular resource. I highly recommend go download it, have a read of it, because if nothing else, there might be someone that you could share it with, that may be interested in starting a podcast. Absolutely go and do that. So, Aggie, but before we round up, there's a few other questions that I want to ask you about.
You still have more.
I do. Future guests. If you could have 3 guests, if you could rub Aladdin's lamp right now and you could have 3 guests of any guests in the world, whether they were dead or alive, who would you want to have on the show?
The first that came to mind right now is Wim Hof, because I've been doing his program. I'm not ready yet to interview him because I want to advance more the method and be able to ask him more deeper things. Tony Robbins is always a person that he's been probably the most impactful person in my personal development journey. So still he would be a person to interview, and these 2 I still have the opportunity to do so. I will pick one from the past as well, and that would be Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, the Stoic philosopher, because I'm very much into Stoic philosophy, and I would love to have a conversation with him.
Very good indeed. Well, obviously Marcus may not be possible, but the other 2, who knows, watch this space. It'd be great to see. So lots of people that get into personal development, lots of times we're thinking about changing our thinking for the future to be able to change, and hindsight's a wonderful thing. So many of us know and think that if we could go back and change things when we were, say, 18 years old, life would be different for us now. I know there's certainly been some key things for me. So if you could go back and meet your 18-year-old self, Aggie, what would you tell him?
That's funny because it's one of the questions I ask my guests. But this question is something that it's so important to me. I've written it down and put it in a little frame. Actually, I will show it here. I have it here. Next to me, and I will read it. This is the advice I would give to my 18-year-old self. Be true to yourself. Follow and do what you're passionate about. Read, keep learning, believe in yourself. Have faith. Don't let other people's voice and judgment stop you. You are unique. You have a purpose in life. Live your life purposefully. Create an extraordinary life. Don't let your fears and negative inner dialogue stop you. They are not you. Stand out, don't fit in. That is the key phrase.
Wonderful. And this is insightful. So I do an exercise, and you shared with me before we went on air that was born out of an exercise that I do, or started the process, sort of maybe that's revision 5 of an exercise that I do with clients at an event that I run. And lots of people, when you ask them the question, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self or your 15-year-old self or your grandchildren or whatever, they share the information. Mm-hmm. But then the question I then ask them is, are you living it? And it's actually a bit of a showstopper for a lot of people, because they understand it's so important. They'd want to share it with their grandchildren, their 15-year-old self, their 18-year-old self, whoever it is. And when they then ask themselves, am I doing the thing that is so important that I would be telling my grandchildren or 18-year-old self? For some people, the answer is no. And that's powerful. But I want to acknowledge you, because read the first 2 lines there.
Be true to yourself, follow and do what you're passionate about.
So that second one. And I want to acknowledge you. Follow and do what you're passionate about. I want to acknowledge you because you, by most of society's standards, have reached the pinnacle. You're a professional in one of the top medical professions. You're a dentist. You've had your own practice. You've run practice. You move from one country to another. You're doing it in your second language. All this good stuff, which for a lot of people is what they would deem success. By most people saying they've gone to university, they've studied again, many years. Yet you've chosen to move away from what society and maybe parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles would have deemed to be the successful career, to follow your passion. And I want to acknowledge you, because you have absolutely done that. From the moment when you first started posting quotes on social media, from the moment when you left Greece to follow your calling, to then deciding to start the podcast, to now taking that to the next evolution to help other people do the same, because I know how much you love podcasting and how it's made an impact to you, which we've heard about today. So I just want to acknowledge you, Aggie, on behalf of everybody that's ever listened to one of your podcasts, that's ever read one of your quotes, that's ever connected in your Facebook group, which I highly recommend people go and join. Because of you doing what you're doing, you are having a huge impact on people globally, and I just want to make sure that you are giving yourself the credit for that, because it's making a huge difference, Aggie. So thank you on behalf of everybody listening, to everybody that's ever listened, and keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you very much, Will. That's so touching. You warmed my heart with what you said, and allow me also to thank you very much, because as I have told you in person, and also I have shared that publicly, you are one of the most important catalysts in my journey the last 6 years of personal development. You have influenced me in so many more ways than you can ever know. So in a way, it's great to have this conversation on this episode with you. So yes, my appreciation to you also, my friend.
So one final thing. Thank you. One final thing. What would be one action point that you would want the listener to go away and implement as a result of having listened to this conversation today?
You know what? Think of what would you tell your 18-year-old self. What's the advice you would excuse me, is the advice you would give to your 18-year-old self, and consider, are you living it? Are you actually following that advice? And if you don't, take some small action towards starting living it. It doesn't have to be something major, as long as you do a tiny little step into that direction. I think that's how it always starts. It starts with a tiny step, an intention, and then it builds up gradually over time.
Yeah,
so that's
I love
advice.
That. And I think that's great advice. And my also little nugget to add to that is that a decision is never made until action is taken. So lots of people make a decision intellectually, they make the decision in their mind, but until an action is taken, then no decision's really been made. So, Aggie, well, look, it's been an absolute pleasure to have hosted the 200th episode, and I look forward to being welcomed back for the 300th, if you'll have me, and if I'm not bumped by Wim Hof, Tony Robbins, or if Marcus Aurelius somehow manages to make some sort of surprise appearance. But no, it's been a true pleasure. Everybody that's been listening, please leave Aggie a 5-star review. If you've ever listened to any episodes, you've listened to this episode, let's leave him a 5-star review. He's got over 100 5-star reviews for his first 100th episode. Let's get him up to over 200 now. He's in the 200 episode, so let's do that. Definitely go and head to the show notes, check out his top 5 episodes, check out and download the 7 steps to creating a podcast. It's a fantastic resource, and if not for you for now, then definitely for someone for the future. If you're someone that's ever considered starting a podcast, we spoke about making the decision. Make the decision, you're going to make it, and make your action today, downloading that resource. Get access to it. It's a free resource, and it's incredibly useful, and if nothing else, download it so you can share it with somebody else. Aggie, thank you for being a wonderful guest. Have you got any parting messages or parting comments for everybody that's listening?
Thank you, first of all, Will, for creating this unique and celebratory episode 200. I will apart from my usual phrase, stand out, don't fit in, I will say a big thank you for you listening to the podcast, and your support means a lot to me. Please share the podcast with people who think that you think that may enjoy it. Thank you very much, and keep listening. I'll see you at episode 300 and hopefully 1000. That's where I'm aiming for.
I look forward to it. Aggie, it's been a pleasure. For everybody that's listening, I hope you found this beneficial. Until next time, make it happen.
Stand out, don't fit in. I hope you enjoyed listening and that you got a huge amount of value from today's episode. To celebrate the 200 episodes and 2 years of the podcast, I'm running a competition. So the first 5 wonderful listeners who write a review for Personal Development Mastery on Apple Podcasts will win a one-to-one coaching call with me. So go to Apple Podcasts and write a few words about your experience with the show, your thoughts and feelings about it. I'm looking forward to reading your reviews and to a phenomenal 3rd year of the podcast with inspiring conversations, actionable items, and the journey to personal development mastery.